Hey everybody, this is Christian the Atheist here with another video. Today I wanted to talk about kind of one of the central core beliefs of Christianity that I think is actually a real problem for the religion. That belief being that Jesus will save us, that he can save us, but will only do so if we choose to believe in him, if we put our trust in him, and if we put our faith in him and believe that he will save us. The reason I think this is a problem is because in order to trust in Jesus or trust in God, first you have to believe in God. And that kind of belief, I don't think is something that you can choose. You know, a lot of people probably think, sure, I can choose what to believe. I have free will. That's what free will is all about, right? But no, let me give you a personal example of the kind of decision I'm talking about. When I first told my mom that I no longer was a Christian and no longer had any reason to believe in God, she said something that kind of stuck with me. She said, well, it sounds like you just decided that you no longer wanted to be a Christian, and so you went out and convinced yourself by reading the right material and watching the right stuff. But this kind of decision-making to me seems pretty absurd. If at any time I no longer wanted to be a Christian, that right there would be proof that I already did not believe in Christianity. If I truly believed that Jesus was the Son of God and that I would go to hell if I didn't believe, I would want with all my heart to continue believing so, if for no other reason than for fear of eternal damnation. This is why I suppressed my doubts and refused to consider the hard questions for as long as I did. I was afraid that something somehow might actually convince me, and then I would be damned for all eternity. But the end of belief came despite any attempts at choosing to believe. Even if right now I thought my life would actually be better if I did believe in Christianity, there is no way I could convince myself and make myself actually believe. So if we must believe in God in order for God to save us, but we can't choose to believe in God, then this leaves the good Christian with three choices. One is that all atheists actually do believe in the God, but they say they don't because they want to be able to do whatever they want to do, which is just ridiculous. I can tell you I don't actually believe there is a God. The second option is that God chooses for us and is therefore unfair and actually wants people to go to hell. Because if he didn't want people to go to hell and he was the one that made the choice, then he would obviously choose that everybody would go to heaven, so why should I worry? But if he's actually choosing people to go to hell, then that's despicable and evil. 3 is that we actually can choose what to believe. And there are some proponents of this idea, and I'll kind of discuss those now. A common argument for why we must choose without evidence is that if God showed himself to us, he would be destroying our free will to choose. But as I've stated earlier, even if you already believe in a God, you still have a choice whether to trust him or not. I mean, the Bible says that even Satan believes in God, but Satan doesn't trust God. Satan's not going to choose to follow God. And even if I did believe that God was real and that the Bible gave an accurate description of him, I don't think I would follow him. I generally don't follow genocidal megalomaniacs. If you argue with this description, read the book of Joshua. The entire book, not just the whole Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho part. Because after they destroy Jericho, they go on. It's an account of God's chosen war band going across the countryside, rampaging and killing man, woman, and child at God's command. If God does not give enough evidence for someone like me to believe in him, then I can't choose to follow him. So then I am left with no free will in the matter. So, in fact, by God not showing himself, he is in fact destroying free will. As as far as more rigorous discussions go, it was actually a little difficult to find much material on this subject. One thing I did find was an essay from religious philosopher William James entitled The Will to Believe. In it, James discusses how he thinks that people can choose what to believe by attempting to justify belief without evidence. This is written as a direct contradiction to an essay by William Clifford called The Ethics of Belief, which I'll get to a little later on. The main point of James's essay is that the difference between a believer and a skeptic is simply the willingness to take a chance on being wrong. The believer is seeking truth, so is willing to risk being wrong in order to have a chance at being right. However, the skeptic, according to James, is simply avoiding being wrong, so is not willing to risk being wrong even if that means there is no chance that he is right. Now, suppose that the first person chooses, but chooses wrongly. The second person, however, refrains from choosing. According to James, they are both wrong. However, the believer is better off because he is in the position of being driven by hope, whereas the skeptic is being driven by fear. And James says he would not want to give up the hope of being right to the fear of being wrong. Quote, "I cannot do so for this plain reason, that a rule of thinking which would absolutely prevent me from acknowledging certain kinds of truth, if those kinds of truth were really there, would be an irrational rule. That for me is the long and short of the formal logic of the situation, no matter what the kinds of truth might materially be. He is correct on one thing. I would rather not choose than choose wrong. But this is not driven by a fear of being wrong. Instead, it is driven by the knowledge that I am far more likely to end up being right if I examine all the evidence before choosing, and knowing that my belief, when reached, is much more satisfying because I do not constantly have to suppress doubts about being wrong. Believing in something without evidence is driven by fear of not knowing. Belief without reason is dangerous because it blinds one to the possibility of gaining new evidence to what might be right in the future. It limits the number of people seeking the truth because so many people think that they have already found it." This clip I'm about to show you is of Ray Comfort, and it shows exactly what I mean. He thinks he's right and is so sure that he's right, he will not look at any other evidence.
Things that we know and the things that we don't know, and there are, as Rumsfeld would say, there are known unknowns and unknown unknowns.
But I've got to stop you there because I know what was in the beginning. You don't know. I know what was in the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You don't know, I do. So how intellectually dishonest is it to say, if we can't create all these things, they happened by sheer accident, that they were just formed by themselves, or to say, we just don't know, which is an ultimate cop-out. God created all these things. He gave you a conscience, you know right from wrong, you're a moral creation, you're different from the animals, and this whole genius of God's handiwork we see in creation is evidence of his existence.
Ray Comfort obviously seems to think that when he says, "I know and you don't," he wins some kind of victory. But what he doesn't get is that admitting that you don't know something is an extremely powerful statement. It is what allows you to go on and find the truth. There's a famous quote attributed to Socrates. It goes something like, "When you know that you know nothing, that's when you're the smartest of all." I would rather not choose, but give those who came after me the ability to choose with confidence than have each generation be forced to face the same uncertain cloud of possibilities. If I admit that I don't know, but I spend my energy towards trying to find the truth, then perhaps my kids might know, perhaps their kids will know, and somewhere, some generation down the line will know. That is the great achievement of the amassing knowledge and being able to pass it down from generation to generation, is that even though we don't know, what we learn will help our kids know. And I would much rather do that then tell my kids, I know, so you don't actually have to find the truth. There's another section in James's essay that I actually read and actually found kind of disturbing and would like to share. He says, quote, "As a rule, we disbelieve all facts and theories for which we have no use. Clifford's cosmic motions find no use for Christian feelings." Here he is referencing Clifford, whose essay I will talk about in a bit. Quote, "Why do so few scientists even look at the evidence for telepathy, so-called? Because they think, as a leading biologist now dead once said to me, that even if such a thing were true, scientists ought to band together to keep it suppressed and concealed. It would undo the uniformity of nature and all sorts of other things without which scientists cannot carry on their pursuits. But if this very man had been shown something which, as a scientist, he might do with telepathy, he might not only have examined the evidence, but even have found it good enough." What he's saying here is that if you don't find a use for a belief, then you won't believe it. If he actually thinks that this is the way belief works, I actually feel sorry for him. And obviously, there would be immense uses for telepathy, but even if he's just using that as a random example, knowledge simply for the sake of knowing is what a lot of scientists contribute their lives to. It's not necessarily for some useful thing, it's just so that we know. And if something like telepathy were found out, that wouldn't be suppressed by a huge band of conspiracy of scientists. It would be studied, examined, and then we would know. On the flip side of the coin, from James, is the essay by Clifford, called The Ethics of Belief, in which Clifford brings up the one way that you can change your beliefs, but not by a conscious decision. That way is through an examination of all the evidence. Even if you are correct in your belief, but do not investigate it, then you, according to Clifford, have an unethical belief. He gives the example of a ship owner who believes, without proper justification, that his ship is seaworthy. He then, because of his beliefs, lets the ship sail. If the ship turns out not to be seaworthy, then we can all plainly see that his decision was incorrect, and it was based on incorrect beliefs. However, Clifford says that even if the ship turns out to be seaworthy, his belief is still unethical because he did not have the proper justifications for obtaining that belief. In summary, we have the choice to hold our beliefs up to scrutiny, to let them be tested, and we have a duty to examine as much of the evidence as we can. But after we do that, even though we can act on our beliefs, we can't choose what to believe. Belief is something that the evidence chooses for us. Belief is something that happens to you. That is why an all-loving God, who would want as many people as possible to go to heaven, would not hinge the option of salvation on simple belief without actually giving us any hard evidence. Ephesians 2:8-9 says, "For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." Preachers love to say how this is full of grace, and how wonderful it was of God that we don't actually have to do anything, we just have to believe. Belief is the hardest of all. If God just said, "Oh, come to church on Sunday mornings and I'll let you into heaven," sure, I could do that. If he said, "Tithe 10% and I'll let you in," sure, I can do that too. If he said, "Give water to thirsty kids in Africa," sure, that's easy. That is easy. But belief is impossible. Thanks for watching. Keep an eye out for more videos next week. Goodbye.